All right, welcome. It's week 42 of 2021. I know it's October. And so here's the news. I'm going to try to go through this really quickly. This is designed to be listenable. That's actually a tag on YouTube. So you should be able to listen to everything if you just want to kind of get a sense of what happened on RWX Rob for the last week, what happened in the community, what I think is interesting, what piqued my interest, what came across my news desk, so to speak. And that came for the community and the industry. So let's just jump right in. First of all, I just want to really congratulate 5shot97 from Twitch. He had been working, regularly with our community, inside the community, with other people, and getting all kinds of help, and landed a data scientist job. So, data analyst job. So that's really exciting. By the way, if you're a member of the community and you have some exciting news and you don't mind us sharing it, obviously anonymity is up to you. Let us know. I mean, it's really fun to share that. I mean, I've told people before, I actually got my current gig, doing high performance computing, machine learning, infrastructure engineer in Kubernetes and cloud native stuff. I actually got this job from a member of the community that I met, who told me about it, and it's really great. So it's really fun to share that way. And I just wanted to put that first. Some trivial stuff is we got some scheduling updates. In fact, we don't have as many people in the stream today right now because I think I pulled a psych on them. I redid the schedule this afternoon, and I bumped news up to 8 o'clock Eastern time. And so I'm going to be doing the news. Hopefully I'll keep it under 20, 30 minutes total. And then AMA, which is the thing that everybody's really looking forward to. People are counting down in the chat, is at 9. So if you want to be here there's a 2-hour AMA session on Wednesday night, AMA, and starting at 9 o'clock. And then there's a 2-hour AMA session now in addition on Sunday. And I added that last week without really warning anybody. I just went ahead and added it. And it was really good. We had some good questions. We're going to talk about that when I get to the Zettelkasten stuff. Zettelkasten, let's use that as a word. And so there's a couple of big things in the industry. Some rumblings out there that I thought maybe we could talk about. I thought I'd give you my take on them really quick. If I have a long take on something, I'll make you a video. But my short take on this, I can give it to you really quick here. So Pike comes out against generics in the standard library for now. So go read about this. This is easy to find. I actually put down and related here. I have a link to the issue. So this should be in the show notes if you're watching on YouTube. You need to read all of it. If you're interested in Go at all, and if you're interested in cloud native and you want to really be a good cloud native person, you should learn Go, since everything is written in it. You should go read that. Basically, he says, you know what? We're not in a hurry for generics. I mean, he kind of agreed. I mean, I've always felt like Rob Pike was a little bit hesitant to agree with generics in the first place. He sort of said so much. He respects the people that are behind creating them. So do I. And all the work they've put in. But he's really trepidatious about the whole, how is this going to change the language thing? And it really, the tone of that comes through in this issue he opened against the Go repo, saying, please, please, please do not put generics into anything in the standard library, because there's several very anxious, very excited teams that are already reworking tons of the standard library using generics, and they were all going to hit at the same time. And so he's asking that they not be released in 1.18, that 1.18 be released with support for generics, and that's it. No standard library changes whatsoever. I really hope that goes through. I mean, it's Rob Pike, so I have a feeling people will comply and they'll decide to wait. But if you want to go chime in on the issue, please go follow that issue and sign in for that. This actually addresses my primary concern about generics, is that people say that generics are not going to affect beginners, and I disagree, because immediately, as soon as anybody can use them, they're going to put them in places that shouldn't be used because they're so anxious and overzealous, and that's already sort of manifesting itself in the standard library of all places. So we're all going to be forced to use them either way now that they've been added, and that is one of the biggest complaints against generics in the first place, is, are they really needed? I am just barely on the side of, yes, okay, fine, we can have them, but I'm not fully convinced. Time will tell. Time will tell. This could be one of the worst things to happen to Go, and we won't know it until they've been out for a good 2 or 3, 4 years, and we see what people have written on them. And that's a little bit unnerving because Go has been a very stable language all this time, and I really feel like there were a lot of missteps in how they did modules, and they had to try to roll stuff back, and they couldn't, and they really weren't thought out very well. And that's not just my opinion. There's people close to the core team who feel that same way, and have said so on Go Time so much actually. So, so I really hope that Go survives generics, and we'll take a look. But Pike is concerned as well. He says, let's be safe here. Nobody's gonna die if we don't put it in the standard library, but they might if we do and we do it wrong. So that's kind of the take on that. I did in kind of general news. Tesla announced that it's leaving Austin, or moving to Austin. Tesla's whatever you think of the company, I think it's important to know, because I regularly talk about on the stream about how technology is leaving Silicon Valley. There's a lot of great people in Silicon Valley. I get anxious and I get mean because there's so much there's just such a bad ethos in Silicon Valley in general. But I think this is interesting that at least one company has said, screw you, we're out of here. And they're not the only one. There's others, and I'm going to continue to report on them as they come across my feed. I don't actively look for them, but I felt like that was a big one, because that's a big company with a lot of money and a lot of prospects, and they don't want nothing to do with California. California said, fine, we're out of here. I think it's mostly because they were asking for tax breaks and all kinds of stuff, and they couldn't get it, so Austin said they'd give it to them. I could be wrong, but that's what I think is happening there. This is not journalism. This is just the rumor mill. So but please don't have me do a journalistic standard. Another industry point. So Exercism was announced. So Arden Labs, this is a whole bunch of things that I found out for the first time. So if you don't know Arden Labs, this is Bill Kennedy and the gang. And they do great things. I'm a big fan. I'm trying to see if I can find it. Or did I spell that wrong? Is it ardenlabs.com? I should have this all. I'm just doing this from the cuff. That's how I do things. Why can't I find it? I should have a link to that anyway. Official mentoring platform. All right, let me see if I can find it. I should have had it in here though. Exercism is the official Go training platform for Arden Labs, not for Go, right? So exercism.org, if you don't know about it, is a thing. I've been following them with great interest for a very long time. I was almost compelled to actually become a mentor. They do. There's a number of things that are really great about Exercism. Probably the best thing about Exercism is that at its core, it promotes mentoring by people who are already coders. The problem is there's no vetting process for the mentors at all. So you get a lot of people who write content. I've been through the content, and I'm not impressed, particularly the Go content. Maybe they've updated it since then. I don't know. When I went through it, it seemed to be lacking a number of things. So I'm just telling you about it so you can go try it out. To use exercism.org, you bring down, the other thing I really, really like about exercism.org is it's not some service that you go use. You bring down the stuff onto your computer to do the work, and then you submit it up. And I believe that that's the true model of learning, because you can actually mess with stuff in an environment where you're dealing with real stuff and not some emulated environment. And I love that. I really love that. So, and you actually, the people, you can get it, you can click on Be Mentored, and they will actually, review your solutions and check it out and give you, the volunteer mentors there will give you feedback about what they think of your coding style and stuff. You can kind of vet the mentors yourself and kind of find out who you would use, and that's something you would have to do no matter what. And I imagine you can actually reach out to people that you respect in the industry you already know of who are in mentors. But the fact that Golang training, the fact that William Kennedy would be involved with this says a lot. I mean, he's probably even though Go in Action has got horrible mistakes in it, which is one of the books these guys wrote. It is it's pretty substantial. There's a lot of people behind Arden Labs. I have nothing to do with them. I have full disclosure. I seriously considered applying to work there at one point, and then there's just I haven't dismissed it, but I just realized there's too much of this going on. It's like they have to present in a corporate way, and a lot of the training that they present is very corporate minded, and it just it just smells like corporate training. No offense, no offense. I love these guys. I've talked to Bill personally. He came and did a meetup here in North Carolina, and we got to chat directly about generics. Actually, we talked about that. He gave a great presentation on generics and the impact that they might have to everything. I really really liked it. So, and this particular group, so the announcement came from Arden Labs, that the Google development. This is another thing I learned about for the first time. This week, it's something called, let me get it right, the Google Developer Network, which I was like, well, what's that about? I mean, the Go Developer Network. Never heard of it. Never heard of it. Doing it since 2014. And so here we go. It's 2019. That's okay. So it came about in 2019. So the Go Bridge leadership team, whatever that is, a sense of community flourishes when we come together in person to better support our Go user group worldwide. The Go community leaders at GoBridge and Google have joined forces. This is probably the organization that reached out to me in 2017, 2018. I started a Go meetup in the area, and I gave it up. Actually, I was running it locally. It was just too much work. I was running my own company and everything, and so. But I actually these guys reached out to me and they said, "Hey, what's up?" And I think they were trying to kind of solidify and bring everybody together in the meetups, and that's really great. I'm glad that effort is going on. I probably should get involved with it more myself. So I'm going to put a goal for myself to get more proactive with participation in GoBridge, whatever this is. So about us, GoBridge is a member of nonprofit organizations, Bridge Foundry. At GoBridge, we connect all the gophers. Okay. All right. Well, I think I need to join GoBridge. I'll go talk to them and see if they would have me with all of my, undesirable characteristics. Who knows? Maybe they will. But so anyway, the official mentoring platform, it was announced in a blog, that is now of the Google Developer Network is now Exercism. So that means because it's open, right? So I think everybody's going to be dumping their energy into creating Exercism exercises, which is great actually, because I was on the fence about whether to invest time creating, mentoring on there and creating content, creating, exercises and stuff that you could do on there. Unfortunately, most of the projects that I would have someone do don't easily work in a nice, pretty framework. So I'm going to be, although I think it's interesting, I personally am going to be focusing most of my effort on Occam's credentials, the open credential merit system that I've been making, to create a list of projects and requirements that I think would fulfill the need of somebody who's going to be someone who would do this kind of thing. So that's where I'm going to be. That's what I'm going to be putting my time. And on as many as I can, I might be able to make exercism activities that go with that. But I kind of want to create a baseline listing of requirements and skills and how to do those things that's independent of any platform, so that the platforms can come in and then provide for things that are needed after that. All right, so I'm going to actually briefly go down and review all the Zettelkasten entries that I made. These are not blogs. These are Zettels, which means they're not, spell checked very well sometimes. And I don't want you to hold it to that standard. But these are all in my Zettelkasten. And these, if you want to go look at the bottom of the list, you can track it by looking at the last one that had news. And I'm going to do this as something new every week. I'm going to start doing to just summarize it in case you hear about something that you might want to go read more about. I'm just going to read you the titles and give you a brief overview. And you can decide if you want to dig down into the details of that. These are constantly being updated, and the notes are changing on them and stuff. So this is a new thing. I am going to do this every week, though, depending on how much time it takes. So as a rule, I mean, this evolving news is becoming what's the community news? What are the high points in the industry right now? Uh, Specifically, the IT industry related to cloud native operations and infrastructure engineering. And that's what I'm interested in. That includes software development to some extent. And what have I written since last week? So you don't have to go read them all. I mean, I think that's an annoyance for some people. So uh, I did. So let's get into it. So the first one here. So I wrote a post. Ericsson estimates Kubernetes on bare metal is 30% cheaper. This actually came from a member of our Twitch community. I think it was Luicenti who posted this. There's a link in this article to go read it. This is really important. We were talking about Talos, um, and I actually didn't make a thing about this, but I should probably talk about it. That reminds me, I need to talk about Talos. Yeah, I do. I need to talk about Talos. Let me make a new one. So, does it create? Well, I don't really need a Zettelkasten for that. I don't. I'll just mention this. So we were talking about metal last week during Kubernetes Colearning, and it came up, that it was that this came up. Ericsson would know performance, and they talk about it, and it's a really objective statement about Kubernetes on bare metal. And so offerings like Talos, Sidero on metal, Sidero Metal, which, by the way, and this is, I don't know if this is community news. I guess I can put it up here. So I'll just put this. I got to meet. I met with Talos, Sidero. They do Talos Linux now. They're calling it Sidero. I think it's metal. So I got to meet with the whole team. Actually, Katie reached out and set up an interview, and I was able to talk with I want to say Steve and Andrew, who are responsible for the newsletter for Talos. What is Talos? Talos is Kubernetes running in an ephemeral Linux that they've made from scratch using LFS, by the way. So if you know Linux from scratch, actually, I really geeked out a lot with I want to say Andrew on this. He's the lead engineer, and we were having so much fun talking about it. He's done several Linux from scratches. He got me really motivated to do it. But they were all on there, and they were just willing to answer questions for 30 minutes on Monday this week. And I again, I have nothing to do with it. I'm just super compelled to look into what they do. They asked a lot of questions about, well, how can we reach out to other people like you? And I said, I don't know, mostly because we don't, people. I'm online, but most of the engineers, like the one who told me about Talos, they don't come up for air much, and it's going to be hard to reach them. So we brainstormed a little bit about that. So so there's lots of exciting things. I'm not going to be putting Talos on my hardware until for a while. That's probably going to be several months away, but I've got to get my certifications first. I don't know if I'm going to do that before or after the certifications. Probably before. So if anybody wants to stay tuned with the Talos stuff, let me know. They offered to come on and talk about it, come on a Discord or a talk show or something like that and talk about their product. And I would do that without any sort of sponsorship. I really believe in what they're trying to do. They did correct me on one thing that I wrote about on my blog. They do, or in my Zettelkasten, they do not have GPU support, which is a non-starter for our enterprise, because we have to have GPU support because that's a machine learning cluster, and they wouldn't even touch it without it. Not to mention they're going to want to be able to customize the drivers and stuff like that. So that's going to be the real core thing to watch in Kubernetes on Metal, in my opinion, is can they support all the different drivers out there, and do they allow users to modify the drivers through network boot. We did geek out a bit on the new need emerging for people who understand how to do network OS boots. In other words, set your BIOS to boot your operating system off the network. Usually, the only people doing this is like computer labs and stuff in a community college or whatever. And nobody knows how to set that up anymore because it's kind of old tech from the 90s and it's all coming back. So please make sure you learn how to net boot a computer. And this is really core to what's coming, which is going to be operating systems on Metal that are automatically updated. And that are ephemeral. So we're going to have ephemeral operating systems, and with that, net booting is going to become a massive central skill. And I've had several people tell me that outside of this little conversation. One in particular said, please make sure people learn how to network boot, because we can't get enough people with that skill. In fact, I brought that up, and Steve was saying, it's actually really hard to find people who know how to do that. So when you're doing your networking learning and your operating systems learning, make sure you include, how do I boot a computer off of an OS image that's just on a network server someplace, and how do I bootstrap that computer? All right, I don't know where we are on time, so I'm just going to go through and read these. This looks like a pretty old one. So I'm keeping Discord, and we're not going to do Slack. Slack's money. It's good, but you have to learn it. But we're just going to keep Discord. I'm going to go ahead and keep Discord indefinitely. We're going to add a matrix.org server at some point, but I don't know when. This is all time-based thing. I did a whole video about that, so you can go watch that video. I did another video about, should I take the money or better tech? This has probably been one of the most popular videos I've made so far. It was right up there with the Rust versus Go video for a solid week. So I suggest people read it if they're trying to decide what to do with their life, and go watch it. Knowing how to ask good questions is the most important skill. This was actually something that was raised during a conversation about interviewing to get a job, and also how to learn. So that's what that's about. Avoid manager suck as an SME. This has been pretty popular as well. This is specifically about how to avoid losing your technical edge because you're now being asked to be in meetings and give conference talks. And if you it's like, as I've said all along, the proportional, there's a direct proportion between the likelihood of hearing somebody talk and how good their skills are. Kind of an inverse proportion, because they're not using the skills, right? They're talking about the thing, blah blah blah. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. This is how I did it once upon a time, but it's all changed in the last year. Oh yeah, that's right. I haven't played with it for the last year. You got to avoid that if you want to avoid it. If you don't, then you can go in, but you got to make sure you keep yourself up to date, and you get yourself a pocket engineer. We talk about that. That's a whole video. Use kind instead of private repos. Kind load instead of a private repo. This was a big thing for me to discover. So yeah, you can preload your Docker using kind instead of using the private repo plugin, unless you're doing deployments that have need to specify a private repo. If you want to simulate, private repo in your applications development using kind, you have to know what kind is to get that. I'm not going to talk about. Kind service mapping sucks compared to Minikube. So this is something that was kind of annoying. Kind does not try to fix your stuff. Minikube will automatically map any service that you have by default. So I was using JupyterHub, which has a load balancer service, and I did Minikube open, and it opened up the URL at the right port, the ingress port and everything. Actually, it wasn't an ingress port. I think it makes an ingress, to tell you the truth. So kind doesn't have anything like that. Kind, you have to do it by default. So that was a big. I've been going back and forth with kind of Minikube about the advantages of both of them. They both have really substantial advantages over the other for different things. And that's a big one. So I'm doing my JupyterHub project, keeping it in Minikube because of that. Python, JupyterHub, and Kubernetes with PyTorch cluster. So yeah, this was a tough one. So I wrote a lot about how the NCG image from NVIDIA doesn't have a Docker file, so there's no way to get it to run in JupyterHub and Kubernetes. To do that, you would have to actually create a from scratch PyTorch container that's built off one of the base Docker stack images. If you're interested in that, you can watch that. That's pretty deep stuff. Kubernetes and cloud native learning, Colearning. I don't really remember what that one was. Oh no, that's a good one actually. What is that one? Let me show you that one really quick. I don't think I made a video about this. So this one is not the right one. No, that's not it. Did I do it wrong? You know what? I might have deleted that one on accident. Yeah, I think it might be one of the ones that I did delete on accident. There was one in here that I was working on and I deleted it. Yep, that's the one. Oh well. I might have another one in there. I'll go look for it. Cloud name Kubernetes calling. Oh yeah, these are videos. Just let me delete that one. So this is these are videos, video posts. This is something you're going to see in my thing now. You're going to see when I post a video that goes with that's a long video. This is like a 5-hour video. It'll post what we learned. Ultimately, this week I've been focused on learning how to get kind to work as a host container. So get a Docker container to work so that I can do my own thing without having to have a virtual machine or a real machine to practice kubeadm deployments. So if you want to anything that says cloud native, that's what that's going to be about for the last week. Today I learned CIDR is just a subnet mask in a short form. I don't know why I didn't know this. The CIDR just means the /16 at the end of the IP address or /8 or something. Did not know that. Filtering all containers on a given network. I don't remember this one. Let me go check. I don't know if we're going to be able to do this every week because this is taking a long time. But let's check. Oh, right. Yeah, this was just a little quick and dirty hack. So you can do DPS, Docker PS -- filter network equals, and then put the network, and then it'll only show you the stuff on that network. I think that's probably pretty basic stuff for most people. I didn't know how to do that. The current news, if you want to see the current news as I'm keeping track of it, you can look at my current news Zettel. And that is where I pull in the stuff for each week. More cloud native stuff. Which SSL tool should I use? The Kubernetes IO documentation was talking about using the 3 we're doing Kubernetes the hard way in Kelsey Hightower's thing, which I strongly advise against for beginners. There's a lot of things in there that will really confuse you. Instead, you should watch the 4-hour Zero to Kubernetes with Tech Worlds with Nana on YouTube. It is brilliant. It's out of date, and it's got some problems with it because of that. For example, they don't use kubeconfig context at all. But it's more on par. It's what you need to do. Kelsey Hightower's tutorial is actually really bad, and we're going to talk more about that later. For beginners, it's really, really bad. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So there's some stuff down here before that talks about it. So use JSON to get the JSON schema for Go template. This is a little trick. Anytime you're able to pass a template, if you pass JSON dot like that, it'll spit out the JSON that you can send to JQ. Let's see. We have calling them host containers from now on. Yeah. So I made a name for a container running in Docker that is essentially a host with its own IP and everything. I'm calling that a host container because there was just no way to refer to it before. Kind does the same thing. InfoWorld article bashing Kubernetes on-prem is wrong. There's an InfoWorld article, you can go read it. It's basically attacking. This was brought up to me when somebody says, oh, it's kind of cute that you think that managing your own Kubernetes on-prem is a good idea. And there was like this pejorative attitude against Kubernetes on-prem, and nobody's doing that was the statement. And it's all about the cloud and using one of the providers, and I just think it's dead wrong. In fact, I don't want to see that world. I want to see a world where everybody uses Kubernetes on-prem as much as possible, and I want them to simplify it, which is headed that way, rather than do that. I think that's just bad. We have the source Etsy best completion is root. Oh, so this is actually a little trick I found. So you guys probably know about, you probably know like when you're going to source a thing, right? So do we have Minikube here? Do you have a Minikube? Yeah. So you guys know about sourcing stuff, right? So if you source let me show you. So Minikube, Docker has its own Docker env, and you have to do a Docker Minikube like this in order to see it. And I need to start it up. Let me show you really quick. This is something that's been annoying me for a long time, and I finally figured it out. This will take just a bit. So Minikube has its own Docker environment variables that have to be used, and completion won't work without it and stuff like that. And Docker-env is the thing, right? And it tells you how to evaluate it, right? And so I was actually doing this. I was doing, this is how you do this if you don't want to do eval, which is, I think it's essentially the same thing, but docker dash env, and that will change it so now your docker, ps is completely different and everything. Well, sometimes, if maybe you have like a short key, a shortcut that you've made instead of an alias you want to complete, right? And it won't complete and your completion doesn't work, and you do the whole like, bash completion thing. Oops. So like this, docker bash completion. Oops, wrong way. Completion bash. Did I get that wrong? Completion. No, I don't know. There's so many of them. They have the same one. I'm just trying to find you one. Completion bash. All right, there we go. So there's a big one. How long is that? Holy cow. To use Minikube, you have to source 32,700 lines. Anybody wonder why I hate Cobra? So anyway, in order to get that in your normally to get that to work, right, you just do this and and now you get it. Now you get the completions and everything, right? But sometimes that error will happen and it will say, oh, I'm sorry, you have a function error. There's an error where I can't do it. And in that case, you just need to source etc docker etc whatever bash completion. So like if you have a container or something, and if you source that, the error will go away. And that's, I read about that in there. You can go look at it. Cloud native and Kubernetes Colearning some more. Docker template for universal PyTorch source builds. I started doing this and it just is not working. They need to make one actually. That we did. Oh no, I found there's a GitHub site out there that has everything necessary to build your own Docker templates from scratch for any possible PyTorch thing. So you might want to go look at that. We did a whole video about what I thought about the KCNA exam and certification in general. Dennis actually last miles directly answered me in an email about that. It's kind of interesting to hear his opinion of it. We did another video about being careful with Pike Publishing and their approach to, they flatter authors and try to beat everybody out, and they don't do any editing at all. And that largely hasn't changed, so be careful of them. That was because somebody was asking about a book. Cloud Native and Kubernetes, more of that. OpenShift doesn't even use Go templates. We were looking at some OC templates, and there's a listing in here of how they don't use any Go templates at all. And I was like, how are they able to do that? Go templates are such a core part of Kubernetes, and OpenShift has decided, at least in that tool, the OC tool, not to use them at all. There's some good things coming out of the Red Hat, but that ain't one of them. The fact that they would not use Go, and then there was some rumors going around that Red Hat has they sort of look at Go as kind of like a Zoomer technology that they don't want to adopt. And if that's true at all, I just don't want anything to do with Red Hat. OpenShift. The fact that they don't support Go templates and yet they're the standard for Helm charts, as well as all the abilities to select everything from kubectl and kubeadm and everything else, just shows a level of disconnection that I feel is really troubling. So making minimal image compatible with JupyterHub and Kubernetes. I tried to do that again. We still struggled with that. And we concluded ultimately that the only way to do that is to extend the Docker stacks base dash notebook because of the Conda and Mamba dependencies. And this, if you want to watch, it's 5 hours of suffering of us concluding that the Kubernetes project, the JupyterHub Kubernetes project, has integrally linked KubeSpawner, which is a JupyterHub thing, with the specific content of the Docker stacks in such a way that the coupling is so tight and strange. Actually, we had a hardest time because it's ignoring the CMD lines in the image and everything, because these images have a bunch of backward compatibility things in them for just running under just a regular Docker environment or a batch environment or something. And I spent a great amount of time trying to understand how this command line was even being executed in these pods. And it turns out that KubeSpawner itself is radically changing the way that line is being called. It has nothing to do with even the entry point. We deleted the entry point and it still worked because KubeSpawner is calling it directly. It was very, very confusing. I really say a bunch of negative things about the JupyterHub project in there. The JupyterHub project is a massive clusterfuck. It is just so bad. It just makes me hate the Python code even more. I've been responsible to try to help use it and stuff, but if there's any chance at all that you can avoid using it, you can if you're a machine learning person, a data science person. But I cannot overstate how disastrously bad the architecture and source code design of JupyterHub itself is, let alone its implementation in Kubernetes, which is got so much extraneous, impossible to track things, and no documentation at all, that it's been very, very hard. I've been struggling with it for more than 3 months now, trying to get it online with minimal customizations, and we run into bug after bug that I just have chosen to not document, including the stupid one where you pass the profile list. If you want to suffer through all of that, any of my cloud native and Kubernetes, any of my co-working stuff, co-learning Kubernetes stuff, some of that stuff will be related to that. There's been some Zero to JupyterHub videos in the playlist too, and those have that content in there. If you've been asked to set this up, come in here and suffer with us. We'll try to help you through it, but it's a pain in the butt, particularly with PyTorch. Which has no standard Docker image, I believe, because of the NVIDIA licensing on the image, which says it can't make any public derivative works. And I personally think if the JupyterHub project doesn't fix that they're going to be in for a lot of trouble, because if NVIDIA doesn't change it, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why that's the thing. There's definitely people out there doing their own PyTorch images and putting them publicly. I don't know if they're in violation of the license and stuff. But this is enterprise software we're talking about, so those are big decisions before you go releasing it to the wild. And I'm actually having a meeting about that. Some of these discoveries, which is very hard. It's very hard to get the team up to speed on all the issues relating that. To say, why don't you just run JupyterHub on there? Just install it and run it. It'll work fine. No, it changes the port it's running on. The KubeSpawner has a lot of very specific things, and then it's tough because then they got to go through the whole thing you did to catch up. So. I only mention that because if you're struggling at all with JupyterHub and Kubernetes, and I know a lot of people are, from the people that have come in and checked in on that, stay tuned and come join us, and we'll suffer together and figure it out and decide where we need to take it next, if any place. But a lot of companies and organizations are considering JupyterHub in Kubernetes because, just like every other application, everything is being turned into Kubernetes-aware applications. And JupyterHub is not free of that. They really want to have that one-stop shopping, and we haven't even assessed what the impact of performance is going to be, and stuff like that. And that's actually, if you want to talk about strictly performance, this PyTorch Docker template, universal PyTorch source builds, actually allows you to shave 20-30% off of your jobs just by building a custom PyTorch to go with your hardware and stuff. It's actually really, really interesting, a really interesting project. Somebody brought it to my attention. So yeah, but that's completely decoupled from Kubernetes and stuff that works. We know you can get performance out of a container, a PyTorch container, from NCG, which has been optimized by NVIDIA, but those images that have been optimized specifically by NVIDIA for their NVIDIA GPUs are not available in Kubernetes, period. I mean, I've spent a week and a half taking one of those standard images and trying to enable it to work, and it can't be done because you don't even have a Docker file to build from. And it's not like you just install JupyterHub on there, because there's a lot of other stuff that has to be there based on how the JupyterHub and Kubernetes Helm chart has been delivered. You have to redo all of that, or you'd have to make your own PyTorch image from scratch, guessing what's in it because you don't have a Docker file from NVIDIA. So it sounds like a lot. It's not really news, but if somebody wants to chime in on that, we'd love to hear from you. Controller plane components as executables and pods. This is a breakthrough that I had just today recently. So going through the Kelsey Hightower, the Hardway tutorial, he has you installing binaries by wgetting them from the control plane onto your control hosts, your control nodes. And when I saw that, I knew immediately that is an anti-pattern and that you shouldn't do it. And then I got thinking about it. I was like, well, that's what he considers the hard way. And I just went to town. I just a video of that. I was like, this is laughably bad. There's no way you would ever do that. And then today, actually today or yesterday, I was listening to Nana actually on YouTube, who's fantastic. You should really listen to what she has to say. She's really good at giving you a great overview of everything. And I don't know. I haven't taken any of her training. I have nothing to do with that. She just announced this week that she's doing a new CKA training. Like, who isn't, right? For $300, which I'm sure is worth the money. But you know my feelings on that. I want to make free education for as many people as possible so they can change their stars. Control plane components. So that was when I found out that kube proxy. In fact, I did a little research on this because I'm wondering, why isn't the kube proxy installed on the endpoints? I mean, I have to install kubeadm, I have to install kubelit, I have to install kubectl, but I don't have to install kube-proxy. And I got looking, kube-proxy is an executable. Kind of like the Hightower tutorial, a bunch of executables, including controller manager and all of that stuff. They're all executables. And you can download them and put them on there, and then you have to configure them and run them and set them up as services. So it turns out that the mystery, and this is the big breakthrough moment I had, is that the control plane components and the proxy itself, it's a worker component, are deployed as Kubernetes resources, specifically as pods for most of the control plane stuff, and that the kube proxy is deployed as a daemon set. It's still a binary, but it's a binary that's wrapped up in a container, probably a from scratch container, and it's deployed as the kube proxy daemon set that runs inside, via the kubelet, talking to the API and stuff on the endpoint nodes. So when I realized that, because one of the hardest parts about looking at all those diagrams is knowing what a thing is. And one of the reasons I believe the ambiguity exists that's confusing everybody is that you can do these things in multiple ways. You can install it the hard way. You can install a kube proxy and create a service for it and run it completely independently and not have it being managed under Kubernetes at all. Or you can use what kubeadm does, which deploys it as a daemon set under Kubernetes management. And so, and I also noticed that all of the stuff in the control plane that the Hightower tutorial calls out that you should individually install, every single one of them is installed automatically with kubeadm, obviously, as I think daemon sets are as pods that run on the computer under Kubernetes management. So our initial conclusions when we were going through the Kubernetes training was, what are all of these little, icons on the diagram? What are they? And we concluded at the time that they were all just pods, and we were right. But it turns out that they're pods that are running very specific executables that could be managed and run completely without Kubernetes, but that modern Kubernetes has put all of that stuff under kubeadm, except for etcd, which is, a one-off exception. So if you don't know Kubernetes at all, that would be hard, but hopefully for some beginner out there, you might want to read that. That might help you make sense of it. If you're a system administrator, like what is actually running and who starts it, that might actually help you answer that question a little bit. Podman adds systemd to all containers. This was a huge discovery. So you guys know I'm not particularly a fan of OpenShift and Podman. I have mixed feelings about it. I'm a little bit more ambivalent. I don't hate on it that much, but I tell you what, the one thing Podman really believes in is systemd, obviously, because they're from Red Hat. So I read all about the dirty laundry, not all, but enough, between the systemd project and the Docker projects. And bottom line, they don't give a shit. Surprise, surprise. Systemd doesn't give a shit about you and your container engine. They don't. They came right out and they said so. They said, so why do you care? Because in order to run systemd in a container, you're like, why would you ever do that? Well, there are still some scenarios, and I have a link to a blog post in here from a Red Hat person saying, hey, you know what? Actually, some people might want to test systemd in their containers. And the problem is that systemd has to mount all kinds of like low-level kernel stuff very dangerously in a way that if you do it wrong, you could hose the system or your containers could hose the system. And so when you're running Docker, so if you're trying to emulate a system that uses systemd, which is still an edge case. I ran into that edge case though because I told you I'm trying to make host containers, right? And by the way, Kind does this. Kind actually has this in there because that you can't have Kind, because almost everything that kubeadm installs uses init. It uses a service installers and stuff like that, and the same sort of it uses the some sort of init engine. And I haven't discovered what other init engines are supported by Kubernetes by default. It doesn't say. It just says can't find an init engine. kubeadm says that. And so one of them it's looking for is systemd. Well, you can't put systemd on that if it's a container. And a VM, you don't have any problem, right? Because it's an actual systemd thing with hypervisor. But if you try to put it in a host container that's not a real system, then it's the systemd unnecessarily has to see all of these individual things on your hardware directly. And so they have to be mounted into the container. Just like you might, this is what's so funny about this. The people who use systemd might complain about Docker having to mount, the var run docker.sock into the running container engine in order to use Docker from within the container, which is a trick that I do in order to avoid having to, double install. Like if you're using Minikube and you're trying to do something, you have to install the images twice, right? Because you got to put the ones in the local Docker if you're using it, and then also in the Docker that's running inside of the virtual machine, assuming you're using the virtual machine, driver for Minikube, which is a whole different ball of wax because putting it all in Docker now is the standard, and believe me, they do the same thing. They depend on systemd as well. So amidst all of this, like, what the fuck is going on questions I was having, I was able to, I've come across this blog that talks about how Podman actually gets around all of that. So anytime you use Podman to run, you can use Podman, you just alias it to Docker, right? You can do Podman run, same as Docker run. Anytime you run a container with Podman, it automatically installs systemd and does all the right things. Mounts it all and gets it running for you, for better or worse. I mean, that's a pretty dramatic thing to do if you're running a container. So along comes your container, you want your container to just work, and Podman says, guess what? I'm going to inject systemd into every container you ever run. So on the one hand, that's great because you can actually test stuff that uses systemd, services and stuff. You can like mess with them and practice using them and everything. But on the other hand, it just saves you all the hassle of doing it the other way by doing your own mounts and everything in Docker. But on the other hand, that's a pretty opinionated, draconian thing to do to my container just because I want to run it. If I'm running a from scratch container, you're going to try to inject that with systemd? I don't know. I haven't tested that yet. But so Podman actually tries to figure it out and put systemd in there because they're so in love with systemd. So for better or worse, that's something to look at. Poor man's Zettelkasten will go. This is a link to a blog post from another person out there who is following my Zettelkasten kind of, at least in the spirit of it, and who made some notes to it. You can go read about it if you want. That's somebody else who's actually done some stuff in Bash and then and they've implemented their own Zettelkasten. And no, we're not there yet. So, and then we get to the, this is the big one. So this is probably the biggest conclusion in my learning that I've had since over the last 6 months. This is now the best way. And I'm going to summarize this really quick. I think you should go read this though. This is now a way I think you should learn Kubernetes if you want to do it exhaustively, like an infrastructure engineer, not just a DevOps person. You need to learn all of these other things: Linux, Git, GitHub, Common Mark, Bash, JSON, YAML, Golang templates, Web Essentials, networking and network troubleshooting. I cannot overstate how important a network is to learn before you jump into Kubernetes because the networking is so convoluted and complicated. Everything, DNS, everything. Using and how to use and create containers in Docker file. You really need to know Docker. I mean, you need to understand containers like thoroughly. You do not need Docker Compose though at all. And my opinion, it's just a waste of time. So this is my current plan, and this will probably change over time. So get familiar with Kubernetes component architecture and communication. which you can do by watching Nana's video on YouTube. It's great. I think it's still really great as a high level, even though some of it's out of date. Get familiar with all the standard Kubernetes resources. Again, Nana's 4-hour video, I cannot having worked for 6 to 8 months now as somebody trying to ramp up in Kubernetes as an infrastructure engineer. I really, really respect how even though she's doing a Mac, she's doing it all on Mac with Brew. She sells HyperKit. I didn't know HyperKit existed. It's a Mac thing. It's a hypervisor for Mac. So, it's really good. It's good and it's free. She's trying to sell you stuff, but who isn't these days? I would use Kind to deploy a simple app. She doesn't talk about Kind at all. She only talks about Minikube. I would actually use Kind first, personally, because it just needs you to just have Docker installed. Then I would use Minikube to try it, and then try to deploy a simple app with an exposed service, which Minikube will forward for you automatically. Kind does not. So use kubeadm init to deploy cluster with VirtualBox and an app. This is where I am. Use kubeadm init to deploy a cluster in Docker in an app. And this means that you have to create host containers in Docker, and you have some extra steps to get systemd and stuff like that to work, so kubeadm phases will work. Probably the biggest breakthrough I had this week was kubeadm init phase. And you can actually read about this. If you do kubeadm init phase -- help, that will show you all the steps that kubeadm follows to install the hard way. In other words, if you want the definitive hard way tutorial, you don't have to go to Hightower's thing that's going to teach you Google Cloud more than Kubernetes. You could go to the kubeadm init phase and look at its help, and actually look at the source code if you want. This is what I've been doing. And you can see every single thing it does and what phases have to happen in what order. It's really great, because if you wanted to, then the next thing would be to drop kubeadm completely and try to do it all using just the components, installing them in your own way. Deploy single node clusters in phases the hard way by following kubeadm. And then you would have, hey, how's it going? And then you would have kubeadm to deploy multi-node clusters using a cloud provider. So you should probably provide it. All this is on-prem so far. And then, in fact, this stuff here is all on your own computer using a single node, or using virtual machines as your single nodes, or host containers as your nodes. And then you go from there and then deploy a multi-node in a cluster with kubeadm. Use kubeadm to deploy multi-node clusters on-prem on your own hardware, Raspberry Pis, old Macs, whatever. And then deploy multi-node clusters on-prem on own hardware without kubeadm, this is really, truly like the gold star. If you can actually deploy all of it, creating your own services and everything instead of doing the phases, that would be, you would know the internal guts of the whole Kubernetes landscape and architecture. At that point, the only thing you can do more than that is read the source code on everything. So let's see. So when you finish these 12 steps, you usually pass any cert exam. I agree. If you actually can do those things and work through those things. But keep in mind, it doesn't include all the extra stuff you're going to need to deploy Kubernetes, Istio, Helm, Elasticsearch, Prometheus, Thanos, Sidero, Calico. There's so much other stuff in this landscape. You're going to be learning. Somebody asked me this week, are you going to hold to your estimate that it's going to take at least a year to become proficient in Kubernetes? And everybody loves to lie to you and tell you that you can learn it in like a week or 10 days. You might be able to deploy a pod or something like that in 10 days. But to think that you're actually not only going to be able to pass the CKID and the CKS, as well as be able to do that work in all the infrastructure work that goes with that, and use all of the third-party applications, that's at least a year out of like an hour or two a day dedication to learning it and practicing it every day. And if you don't believe me, just watch my co-learning streams, and you can suffer with me and others. I don't want people to get the wrong impression. I'm not trying to frustrate you, but I don't want people to think that you can just turn a key and it's all going to be there for you in your head like in 3 weeks. Maybe you can, maybe you're smarter than me. Maybe that's true. But most people who say those things, then you kind of push them on some of this stuff, and they're like, no, didn't know that. So anyway, you can go. I spent a long time on that one because that's a big focus of this stream, and I really feel like you should go there. Somebody told me about Caddy Server, an entire web server in Go, which I thought was cool. Wrote a blog about, or wrote an entry about. Discover Better OS Exec. Oh my God. So this is a really great write-up about all the reasons that you should learn Go, and you should learn to read the source code. So this week, being able to read Go has helped me in 3 immense ways. One of them was I was able to read through the Kubernetes source code to understand like the API and how it was talking and stuff. The other one was reading through the kubeadm source code and seeing how the phases are implemented in that, which is, it's right there in very concrete code if you want to understand it rather than reading somebody's write-up and documentation about it. And the third was, while I was looking through the kubeadm code, I discovered a Kubernetes version of the utility, the OS exec library, which allows you to mock up executable files. And when I saw that, I was like overwhelmed with joy, because if anybody has done any, one of the pain points of writing a Go utility is you want to be able to call stuff from the underlying OS, right? Well, you have to, if you call os.lookup and stuff like that, then it's gonna look things up, and they have to be actually on the system. So you can't test it. You can't test it with your own mock-ups of the supposedly existing applications there. You can't mock any of that up. Well, they've got an entire perfectly implemented library with an interface type that fulfills that need. So you can use this. I'll never use OS exec again, because I know about it now, because I read about it. So, and by the way, there is tons of great code in the Kubernetes code base. If you really want to learn Go, just dig in and start reading some of the stuff they're doing in there. In fact, I learned about Steve Francia's P flags, which is another version of the regular flags. I might not like Cobra, but I was like, oh, this is pretty good. It's like a better version of the flag library. There's a bunch of really great stuff in there. Let me get through this and I'll answer the questions that we got. So, this is a little bit of news here. So I changed my terminal size to 92 by 25. At the same time, I also found out that Kubernetes kubectl seems to expect 90 columns. So if you want to make sure that your Kubernetes CTL output generally fits on the screen, 90 column width. So there you go. So that's why you're seeing this. I did test this on my phone. I did notice that Nana, who's doing her tutorials, she's probably smaller than me even in terms of her columns. So I was running 80 column width before, so now we're going to be 72. Yeah. Okay, and I'm gonna have to end on these rants and stuff. I don't know how long we got. I'm going a little bit over here. I want to try to keep this down to 30 minutes to an hour. So I'm gonna let you read the rant. I'm not gonna say anything more here. I use strong language here about Code Cloud because I mean it, and it is really, really bad. And I'm not gonna say the names here. I'm gonna let you go read about it, and you can make your own decision. But I cannot overstate how bad Code Cloud is and how bad these educational review articles are that don't even include freely available resources. This educational review article didn't once include anything from Nana on YouTube, all of her free content. Now since this last week, she just announced that she's going to have her own, for money sort of thing. But the amount of free content that Tech Worlds with Nana has provided on YouTube for Kubernetes is absolutely astounding. It blows my mind, and it proves to me that is the way education should be done online. And and all the people that have supported her and sent subscriptions and stuff and every other thing. Plus, she's also got her own thing that she's forking off. Now, I probably would never do that, but I got to tell you, you know me, I'm very skeptical when I talk to somebody and I listen to what they have to say. And I've listened through her whole 4-hour thing, and I am blown away by how clear she's been able to make the concepts and illustrate them, particularly if you turn off the video. If you turn off the video, at least for the first 2.5 hours, and you just listen to it, and you listen to what she says, and you kind of visualize it yourself, and then you just look at the phone every once in a while, and then you check your understanding while you're going out for a nice walk under the moon or something. And I'm telling you, it is really, really good content. It's so good that I'm just going to recommend her to everybody, as opposed to the Udemy courses that I took from the other dude, who are a total fail. They fail to understand even basic infrastructure knowledge. And not to, I cannot overstate my disagreement with it. I'm so glad I got a refund. You guessed my wife. I was like screaming. I was so mad. I was like, I cannot believe people are paying for this. And now he's got his own company, and he's got all these people that are certified, and they're posting little pieces of paper and everything. And I'm just like shaking my head going, oh my God, we're in so much trouble. We are in desperate trouble. I just, so I'm going to say, just don't use Code Cloud. Use as much Nana as you want to, and stick with us. And we're trying to find a open credential system where we can, as an industry, we can come together and agree on the skills that are needed in a way that can be listed out by accomplishments, saying you need to do this and this and this, so that people can be their own autodidactic selves and take themselves through this, rather than say, see my little piece of paper I paid $800 for? Now am I ready to get a job, right? Because they have nothing else to show for it. No clusters of their own, because they're all using this stupid fucking web interface. People, learn skills with real technology. I cannot overstate this. And I talk about this in this article. I've had a hiring person, a very substantial hiring person in our stream, say, I almost verbatim, in fact, I think I have him in my quotes list, I would hire somebody playing around with this technology in their garage on Raspberry Pis and old computers over somebody with a certification any day. And I cannot overstate that. Every single time I talk to somebody that I highly respect who's got these skills, and lately, and including people in cloud native on the foundation, they're like, well, I never got the certificates. I don't know. I never actually went that route. But they, some of them like worked for Docker and wrote, some of the code and everything. Oftentimes the people that are going to be the most qualified are not going to be the ones with a piece of paper. If you're getting a piece of paper, it's because you're trying to break into the industry and you need to do that little extra bit of proof. But that's to supplement the overwhelming proof of your employability that you've already created by all of the stuff that you've created on your own and documented as you created it, or could even let them sample and play around with, or you have your own hardware running on-prem in your house. I mean, just like this person said, they would take that person any day, that passionate person who set it up even on Raspberry Pis, over somebody with a ton of stuff that they just threw a web interface, no matter what, if it's a container or not. So, so what did I say? So yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, Jay, that's totally true. So all those silly projects to try to build your own version of things are actually useful, like your own content manager. Container manager, absolutely. And this is another thing. We are talking through web interfaces are fine, but this is what we want to use a web interface for. Okay. Yeah, learning how to do Kubernetes administration and cloud native applications design through a web interface is, and only a web interface, is a major anti-pattern. And I know that everybody keeps using it that way, but I totally disagree. Yeah. So, and pass the bar, said no one ever. Well, yeah. Yeah, it's completely different. It depends on what you're talking about. So Jenny, as usual, is giving me shit about, well, you wouldn't hire a lawyer who just works out the law on their own. You want to hire somebody who's certified and has the credentials. Yeah, if you want to actually know the fuller version of this answer, watch the video I made called Why Certify. And on the one hand, obviously, a lawyer needs to get certified and prove he has the credential, or she. And over here, you have to have, there's things that if you got a credential, some people would say they could actually work against you. And they have said that. There was a big fight on Quora over this. Between the hiring manager of Google actually said, if you put certified Java software engineer on your resume, it's a bad thing because it proves that you buy into the fact that you think certificates matter for Java software development, and they actually don't. And it was a radical opinion, but that's the other side of this. There are jobs that absolutely people will take passion and skill, proven skill, and it's all about, as you said, it all depends on how your employer produces trust. If your employer trusts you to learn the right things, then they're going to hire you on those skills. They're going to look at other things. So it really depends. But I'm telling you, going through a course on Code Cloud is a mistake. And if you want to do it anyway, that's on you. You don't need to do that. You can definitely learn all that stuff on your own with quality content like Nana out there. But more importantly, you can find people who already know about this stuff and pair and shadow with those people. I mean, come on, we're talking about giving somebody $800. I guarantee you, if you can, this is the problem, is being able to find them, right? Find an actual engineer who does the work. Like I've been very lucky. I've found people who have been doing this work for years. And those are the people who, I would reach out to, and those are the people that I've been able to pair with in the past. That's how education in the Linux and Unix space has always been done, for better or worse. And I would like to change it. I would like to at least have a list of the things that we agree that we should all know how to do. but that's it on that one. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Is unrelated to KDE, even though they have Ks all over in the world. So yeah. Yeah. So I just gonna put that out there. Yeah. And take the bar and pass it, fantastic. If you think you can pass the bar exam on your own, fantastic. Well, I mean, that's actually a bigger problem, and I don't want to argue about whether people should have a legal system. I just got a legal document that is the dumbest thing I've ever got. It has no information in it whatsoever, but somebody had to FedEx it to me because of some legal requirement. So if your litmus test is the legal system as a good example of how to educate people and make sure they're quality, then we got an issue. Let's see. Do I know a lot about PVCs and PVCs? No, it's actually one of the things I'm still learning about. I know how to do them, but I'm not like deeply exposed to them. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the news today. That's as usual, regular news. If you want to take me to task over any of these things, please do it in the comments. I welcome a good argument, as long as we can stick to the to the topic at hand. And I'm easily swayed by facts and objective conclusions. So if you have new information for me, please let me know. I've changed my mind on many things. So thanks a lot, and I'm going to wrap up this news video. Bye. That's like a